Welcome to the Fix Your Gut podcast. My name is Jason Hooper, and as always, we're here with John Brissom.
Hey, everybody. Hope you're doing well.
Today, we're going to be talking about wheat and other grains and people who might be sensitive to them. So, there are proteins in grains called prolamines, and these are specific proteins that are contained next to starches that are to help the endosperm grow into a sprout. And that's their biological purpose. And so we have a different range of prolamines. In wheat, we have something called gladien. In we have like barley, I think horidines, and rye, scallions, and oats. What is it? Avenines, right?
Avenines or Avenin, yes.
Yeah, yeah. So we have, and then what's the one in rice? They're not they're storage proteins in corn and rice too that are sometimes called prolamines, but they're not quite the same because they don't quite have the same amino acid sequence. So in traditional classification, they're not really considered to be prolamines or glutens.
Well, yeah, like with corn, it's xenin.
Okay.
With rice, I don't remember, but there are some in rice too as well. Yes, but they are proteins that some people can have negative reactions to, similar to these prolamines that we're going to talk about.
Yeah, and essentially, what happens when they run into a hydrolase enzyme is that they break down into their specific proline and ammonia, and some people have reactions to that particular breakdown from and some people, um, and notably in gladien have sort of maybe they might have a genetic predisposition or some kind of something wrong in their gut with the microbiome that makes them more sensitive to that.
Yeah, for rice, it appears that unlike xenin, unlike corn, they don't contain prolamine. Instead of prolamine, they store it in globulin.
Oh yeah, globulin. Yeah, yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's kind of a generic protein term also. Um, but yeah, I mean, all of these are proteins. They're all proteins that are different, that are difficult to digest because it's um, it's not quite like a carbohydrate and a amino acid, um, but it does have sort of like a hydrolyzed component um, to the protein and the amine backbone, or so that has to be broken down before the protein before the amino acid and protein peptides can be separated for digestion. One of the reasons why some people avoid these proteins and grains is because they have really slow digestion. They have really slow motility or MMC function, and they get constipated a lot. And the food stuff stay in their guts for a long time because their bowel transit's very slow. And so if you have these proteins that are difficult to break down, and you suffer from constipation a lot, that's going to affect the microbiome, and in turn, the microbiome is going to continue to produce compounds that slow down your digestion. So there's an argument to be made that people who are suffering from constipation might want to stay away from a lot of these slow digesting resistant starches and these difficult to break down proteins. And I would even lump casein proteins
Well, they're
in
all
with that
opioid
too.
peptides. They would
Yeah.
slow down the. I mean, a lot of people, like casomorphin is an opioid peptide. Gluten
Mhm.
exomorphin is a opioid peptide.
Mhm.
Glidomorphin, they're found in wheat and rye and barley. And rubiscalin, a lot of people don't realize they used to react very negatively to spinach. Rubiscalin is also an opioid peptide found in spinach. And I think there's one found in soybean too. I think it's like soy morphin 5 or whatever. But yeah, those opioid peptides would slow down digestion, would they not?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Because the opioid system itself, when it's activated, it tends to slow down digestion.
Absolutely. Yeah. If you've ever been
So
on,
yeah, it's very interesting that people who ingest all of these opioid peptides, and we'll discuss more about those opioid peptides later. They tend to um, end up having brain fog and inflammation and digestive issues, and they tend to opioid peptides tend to slow down digestion.
yeah, yeah. I mean, actually, if you don't mind, let's go ahead and discuss opioid peptides right now,
Yeah.
peptides right now, just because. So, if you've ever taken yourself or known someone, and if you live in the United States, there's a really good chance you've known someone who's taken some kind of a painkiller that was a narcotic-based painkiller that had some sort of opiate in it. And the major side effect for long-term use of opiates, of course, is constipation because it slows you down. If you've ever had surgery and have had outpatient surgery, you know that um, sometimes recovering from that, you have a lot of constipation and stuff. And it's like John was saying, when the opioid receptors in the gut and even in the brain are activated. These opioids or opioid peptides bind to the receptors. It slows down your MMC function, or it slows down your digestion.
Motility.
Yeah, yeah. So so if you're constant so how do these work? You have peptides which are basically strings of proteins, and then your body itself has receptors that are set up to bind to endorphins. Those are the compounds that we naturally produce. But these peptides, chemically, they're shaped and they're similarly charged to these endorphins, that they resemble them closely enough that they can bind to the receptors.
Mm-hmm.
And it's similar to if we were producing those endorphins ourselves. So, like if we were responding to pain or if we were responding to exercise or something like that, and these play, a role in, our stress and pain management. Of course, is probably the primary response. It's also it also has to do with like emotions and your ability to become motivated or not motivated, and it affects your appetite and the types of food that you want to eat. Um, and so, if your opioid receptors are active, then your body's going to start craving more starchy foods. You're going to want to eat more wheat, and
Or
you're going to want
dairy, or
yeah,
like
yeah,
cheese from the casein, because it's kind of like a negative feedback loop.
right, right. So, and it affects the reward system in the brain. It really spikes dopamine, and so um, is it chemically addictive to eat wheat or drink milk? No, not really. If you go off of meat or wheat or milk, are you going to have like the same withdrawal as you do when you go off pain meds for a month? No, there's no way you're not going to get DTs or shakes or anything like that. Like it's not quite. I mean, you're not going to have the
But it
same
can
reaction.
make you want to have it, though.
Yeah,
Is it
well, absolutely,
the
because you're gonna.
dopamine boosts and
Mhm,
everything? It can make you crave it and want it. It's like a
absolutely,
cycle.
yeah. So dopamine is a neurotransmitter in the brain, and it's
Makes us motivated, makes us happy,
for
and
sure, for
everything.
sure. The easiest way to increase dopamine in the brain is when you're working towards a goal, and you're getting closer to your goal, and that really increases dopamine intake. And just a side note, it's not achieving the goal that increases dopamine; it's working towards the goal. So once you
Mhm.
achieve your goal, that doesn't increase dopamine at all because you're like, okay, I did it. Now what? But working towards that goal, whatever that goal is, if it's getting dinner on the table and you're cooking a nice, delicious meal, every chop of the knife blade, every every time you season the pan, whatever, that's gonna increase dopamine too. Um, and sometimes the foods we eat do the same thing. So like people who really like to cook or people who really like to do things, these are behavioral based ways to increase dopamine, but then there are dietary based ways also. So that's where the these opioid peptides come in. Sorry, I'm having trouble talking today.
And the body also produces opioids too, as well. Like you'd mentioned, it does to pain reactions, and it does for exercise, and produces endorphins and stuff. It's or sunlight. Sunlight produces opioids too, as well, through exposure. So the body, it's not. We're not saying that opioids are bad. Obviously, they're needed
Mm,
by the body, but it's when you do everything in excess does it start to become a problem. There's a big difference again in between exercising, but you can over exercise too now and break down the body compared to shooting up heroin or even eating or
right.
drinking milk. There's big differences.
Yeah, I mean, and when we start talking about the different types of gladian and the different types of prolamines, one of the things that we're going to be discussing is the sequence of amino acids, particularly one amino acid called cysteine, L-cysteine. And when we have certain beta endorphins and gamma endorphins, they have a series of cysteines that are chained together that um, when we have this neuropeptides, we have these neuropeptides. They appear very similar to some of the compounds in our foods.
Yeah, and a lot of people don't realize too the drug Imodium. It's a opioid that does not cross the blood-brain barrier, so it does not get you high except under extenuating circumstances. But however, it does slow down your digestive tract. But I don't recommend the use of Imodium because and they're not actually recommending conventionally the use of Imodium anymore for food poisoning or any type of toxic event like toxic megacolon or anything. Because slowing down the digestive tract is one of the least things you want to do when the body's trying to expel these toxins through diarrhea.
Yeah, I always take Imodium with me on trips when I'm going on trips, and I know
Activated charcoal is better, Jason.
I understand that, but if I'm sitting on a plane for 3 hours, I kind of need to control that. And so for me, not having to change my clothes when I get off the plane is more important than being able to expel that stuff for that time, and then I can deal with that my medical issue a little bit later. So that would be my use for taking Imodium.
But you would say like if someone had long term food poisoning or long term C. diff or long term, they're developing
Like, yeah,
toxic megacolon, it's definitely counterindicated in that.
absolutely. I mean, like if I was at home, and I had, I was at home sick or whatever, and I was having trouble like that. There would be no reason for me to do that because I would have access to a bathroom all the time. I would have access to a shower. I'm not going to have important meetings the next day, or I'm not going to have to, I'm not
Yeah,
going to have.
I understand. I still think activated charcoal and bismuth could be used better, but that's just me.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a musician, and when I go on stage and perform, I feel better if I don't have diarrhea in my shorts. So that's for me. When I'm traveling, when I'm on tour or something like that, I always take some. Now, I always take some with me. Now, I've never had to take it um, when I'm on tour, but I just like to have it. Like I have this whole kit of stuff that I take that I would never take at home, but I take with me on trips, um, just in case.
So do
Um,
I.
yeah. So like, for example, acetaminophen, probably wouldn't never take that at home. Probably wouldn't take too much ibuprofen at home. But when I'm on a trip, if something happens and, it's just, that's just what I do. Both acetaminophen and ibuprofen also have really negative consequences to the gut, by the way. So,
And the body as a whole over time. I mean, NSAIDs block prostaglandins, which help renew our stomach lining, and Tylenol or acetaminophen blocks glutathione production, which will poison the liver.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it pretty much shuts it down for a long time. So it's not the best to take. So let's talk about the difference between these prolamins, these proteins that are in grains. Who should avoid them? Who's okay to eat them? Um, and then I think we've already talked about rice a little bit. Rice doesn't truly have prolamin in it. I think most people can eat rice if it's freshly cooked and not reheated rice. Reheated rice has resistant starch in it. I think, what is that, type 3 resistant starch?
Yeah, most people can't handle. I mean, people with bad guts can't really handle resistant starch very well. I can handle it now just fine. My gut's in pretty good shape, but back in the day, I could not. But yeah, they don't contain any of the prolamines. So the prolamines, there's wheat, which is gliadin, barley, which is horidin, rye, which is saccharin, corn, which is xenon, sorghum, which is kefirine, and oats, which is avenin, with oats being one of the major ones. So these proteins have a high glutamine and a high proline content. Um, and the body does, like you mentioned earlier, Jason, the body doesn't really have a really do a really good job of breaking it down, and our microbiome can to some degree, but depends on a person's state, a person's microbiome. So these proteins, these plant storage proteins, the body can have a very negative reaction to them upon ingestion, especially someone with celiac disease like myself, where the body starts producing, transglutamase antibodies and antibodies to the prolamines, and they end up causing problems. And some people with non-celiac gluten sensitivity, they can react to them as well. And they can react to other proteins. Now, myself, I do fine with xenon. Xenon doesn't cause me any problems. I do fine with sorghum, which is kefir, I don't have any problems with sorghum. I don't have any problems with oats, as long as the oats are certified gluten-free and there's no cross-contamination.
Do you eat a
But
lot
there
of?
are,
Sorry to interrupt. Do you eat a lot of sorghum, like a lot of syrups, or how does that show up in your
I
diet?
eat it in gluten-free flours.
Oh, okay, okay.
Syrups, no. I don't use any type of. The only syrup I might use on occasion is maple syrup, but other than that, I don't eat that very often.
I've
Um,
started using it recently, and those of you who do your own home gardening, or if you do your urban gardening, I found that it works really well to attract aphids. So the aphids will get into my sorghum instead of my other plants, and because I live in a residential area, they're always spraying for mosquitoes and stuff, and it's really not
yeah.
good because it kills the ladybugs and it kills the bees, and so it's not good for gardening. But that's I do the sorghum thing, and I've tried to make the syrups and stuff, and I've never tried to make flour out of it. But I usually feed it to my chickens, and the chickens love it. So that's
How
what I
much
use it for.
fructose is in this sorghum serum?
Um, I don't know off the top of my head how much fructose or versus
It's
sucrose.
got to be less than agave, obviously. But yeah, so when people have celiac disease, they can very rarely. Some people can cross react to these other prolamins, and definitely with wheat and barley and rye, if you have celiac disease, you have to avoid those. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it in most cases. Um, but corn, sorghum, and oats, you may be able to ingest them per your tolerance. Like for me, corn, organic corn, xenon doesn't increase my heart rate. It doesn't make me feel sick. It doesn't give me brain fog. I feel fine. Um, and for some people too, it can be. And we'll talk about later some things, because when we talk about wheat, is you've probably seen this discussion, Jason, recently about them casting shade, saying gluten is not the cause of non-celiac gluten insensitivity, that it's fructans.
Mm,
But there, and there may be some truth to that to some degree, but when we're talking about wheat, when we're talking about, it's the way it's prepared, it's the way it's grown. Some people might be reacting to the iron fortification of wheat, for example, or the
hmm.
glyphosate that's being sprayed on wheat, or the wheat being bred differently so that it contains more of these prolamines through a shorter harvest time. So it could
Yeah,
be
yeah.
any of these. And some people, even people who are non-celiac, they actually might be able to ingest an einkorn wheat they fermented and they've grown at their own house. Not grown, but they made it their own house, and it's not iron fortified, it's organic, there's no no to very little glyphosate, if any at all, and they can tolerate that. But the moment they go eat whatever you call quote unquote bread at Walmart, they have a massive flare up. So
Right.
not all
Yeah.
of this is equal to one another.
Yeah, and it can change over time too. Like people can come in and out of issues with these compounds, with any of them. And some, yes, different products, different labeling, whatever, some seasonal things. But yeah, like you brought up a good point that over the course of time, we've been cultivating grains that have higher yield, shorter growing season, so we get a lot of grain really quickly. We don't have to wait for it. And then a lot of the pastry stuff, we've been also been growing starchier and more protein rich grains too, so that so that basically the flour is more consistent, and it you can if you're baking bread, it can rise higher because it's got all those sticky proteins to to keep all the bubbles in it, the air pockets and stuff. So um, yeah, that's what we've been doing over the course of the years. Now they had this stuff called einkorn, which supposedly is like the original wheat. They supposedly, I don't know if this is true or not, but the lore is that they found some kind of like frozen Neanderthal in Europe, and they opened up its stomach to see what was inside that, and they found these einkorn grains, and so they were able to pull those grains out, and they were able to sprout them and grow what we thought might have been Neolithic or very early Neolithic grain. And it turns out that it has little to no prolamine in it at all. So I guess the theory is that through cultivation over the years, we've been
Selective breeding.
just selectively breeding this stuff to get more and more glutens in there. And then in the United States, well, I think especially because in Europe they tend to use, they tend in Europeans.
Heirloom wheat, usually.
Yeah, they tend to be a little bit more patient with just about everything. With their baking, they don't use the fast activated yeast. Sometimes, the stuff that they use, it takes sometimes, they want to.
They let it prep. They have to prep it overnight or over a couple of days. It's
Yeah,
not
yeah,
immediate.
absolutely. Yeah, I mean, it's like, and they fold it a lot, and they roll it and fold it a lot, and they put it back in the refrigerator, let it rest overnight, and then they do it again. Sometimes they fold in butter and all sorts of good stuff, and they use a different kind of flour, and they use a different kind of yeast. It just takes longer. And in the United States, people want stuff now. They want their hamburger buns, and so it's like, all right, here we go.
Let's put all these dough conditioners in there and more. Let's put more cysteine in there. And
yeah. One thing I've found for doing batters, it works really well in batters, is that instead of doing the beer batter and stuff like that, to put the CO2 inside of the batter to make it nice and fluffy and flaky. What I'll do is I'll mix up the batter, and then right at the very end, like right before I'm going to put it on whatever I'm about to cook, I'll mix in a teaspoon of baking soda, okay, sodium bicarbonate, and then another teaspoon of citric acid. And you can get citric acid from most of the places, like people who make their own wine and stuff. They use citric acid to change the acidity of the wine as they're brewing it. And you can add a tablespoon of each of those and mix it up, and you get those bubbles. If you use cold water, it works even better because cold water tends to hold the CO2 even more. Try that. You'll end up with really nice, if you're making tempura, to get your rice flour, hydrate it, and then at the very end, mix up that solution of sodium bicarbonate, citric acid. Oh my goodness, you'll have the flakiest tempura ever.
Sounds great. Now you make me hungry.
And so I got this idea, and then I'm like, well, instead of using the yeast in the breads, why don't I try the same thing? It doesn't work exactly the same. It works better.
But it's healthier.
Yeah, it for sure is. It works better in sourdoughs and stuff. There might be a way to work it in. It's a work in progress. I'll just put it that way. Like, it doesn't work the same as, when you let your bread rest for a couple days, and like make it, and it's not quite as good for some of your, puff pastries and that kind of thing. But I'm still working on it. Maybe I'll find a way, because there's this cross reaction with the yeast and with the prolamines. So if you eliminate the yeast, or if you change the yeast you use, that could make a big difference.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, the country of my heritage, France, they eat the highest amount of gluten in the known world, and they have some of the lowest rates of celiac disease. And is it because their diet's different and the way they prepare the wheat, and the wheat isn't sprayed with a lot of glyphosate, and it's not iron and folic acid fortified, and the crops are grown differently, so they're not containing more. I mean, is there a possibility of that might be why, Jason?
It could be genetic, it could be lifestyle, it could be what they're eating it with. Um,
They usually eat it with a lot of butter and wine.
yeah, yeah, um, yeah, absolutely. Or yeah, or cream or whatever. Sometimes they batter it in egg and toast it. And there's all sorts of different French pastries that are delicious, but yeah, and they have the lowest increase of, or they have the lowest instances of celiac, and it might just be because of their genetics and their lifestyle that they have that low instance of celiac, and that's why they eat more gluten. Now, like if you look at the Italian cuisine, they eat a lot of pastas, which are more like stone ground um, wheat, and so there's not a lot of yeast in there, but they do have those like big, Italian loaves of bread that they make and stuff that are delicious too.
But there's not a lot of or folic acid fortification or glyphosate either.
Well, yeah, because
In
they're
them.
making it. They're making it all in house. They're baking it right there. They're not. It doesn't come out of a factory and then get shipped to a restaurant or to a grocery store or
So you're
something.
telling me Wonder Bread isn't healthy, with all the genetically modified components added to it, and dough conditioners, and preservatives, and iron fortification, and glyphosate sprayed on it, and folic acid. That's not healthy, Jason. I'm confused.
Um, well, I didn't say that. I didn't
It's
mention
it's on
Wonder
it's on the
Bread.
food pyramid.
Yeah, yeah. I didn't mention Wonder Bread specifically, but I mean, if anybody could choose between any sort of store-bought bread and a fresh baked loaf from your oven, which one would you choose? I mean,
Fresh bake, obviously.
absolutely. I don't. I mean, if you need, I mean, if anybody chooses the store-bought, whatever bread, you need to go talk to somebody because something's wrong with you. All right, so and bread at home is really easy to bake too. It's not that difficult to do. It's super cheap. Like I can make a couple of loaves of French bread for like 30 cents, and it's obviously I don't have a problem with gluten. I'm talking about like all the baking and stuff that I'm doing, but I don't try to eat a lot of it. I tried to use different grains. Like I like oat flour, and I like to use oats in the morning. I like the rye, buckwheat. Buckwheat noodles are delicious. Like
Mm-hmm.
if you're cooking Japanese food,
Yakisoba.
yeah, yeah, delicious. Really like those. Um, you know,
Now, some
uh,
people with histamine issues might not be able to tolerate buckwheat noodles, but I don't have
yeah,
a problem.
yeah, for sure. So, what about I eat a lot of oats and I do okay with it, but what about the avians? Like,
Some people will cross react negative with it. Then the population's anywhere between 1 to 5% of people who have celiac disease or even gluten sensitivity will react negatively to it.
absolutely, yeah. I mean, it seems that with the protein in the oats, you have okay. So if you start to look at we're going to nerd out a little bit, but just bear with me. So if you look at the gladians, like you have three basic types. You have the alpha beta gladians, you have the gamma uh, gladians, and which are the ones that are cysteine rich. Those are the ones that we see the most of. Um, and then we end up having sort of this like uh, this higher like acidic like the alpha beta tend to be like alcohol soluble, and then we have this like these gamma gladians which is like really cysteine rich, and then we end up with like this really like acid soluble um, type, which are each separated based on their amino acid sequence. Um, and so when you're looking at when you're looking at those, and then you also look at the oat the proteins that are found in oat. Um, it's similar in its like cysteine like amino acid pattern to where it looks similar. It's not completely identical, but some people can cross react to it. But there's still, like, if you look at the amount of gluten in wheat versus the amount of avian in oat, there's way more in wheat. So you might end up with something like, I don't know, 20 20 parts per million or something. I don't know. It's just not not a lot of it in there. But of all of the prolamines that we've talked about so far, the avians are the closest biochemically speaking to gluten.
Is it possible that people could be reacting to the iron and folic acid fortification of the oats, or the amount of glyphosate that is sprayed on oats as well? And if they eat, really traditionally prepared oats, that they soak overnight and are organic and don't have any of those other issues that I mentioned previously, that they might be able to ingest that better?
Yeah, I mean that's true too. But then, like, do they eat Doritos?
Well,
Because
yeah, I mean, of course, the corn's going to have glyphosate or atrazine in it too. I understand that.
yeah, yeah,
But it's a dose by tolerance thing, and
right.
there's certain crops like oats and wheat that have a crap ton of glyphosate. Where corn, it does have some glyphosate, but it also could have atrazine instead. And yes, atrazine is what Alex Jones says, turning a frogs gay and all that other stuff. But they're both horrible pesticides. I mean, glyphosate. More and more information is coming out. I mean, I did the research on it. It's antibacterial. It destroys bifidobacterium and lactobacillus. It interferes with manganese transportation and utilization by the body. It's garbage. Again, is it people react? Were the rates? Would you say the rates of celiac disease have increased,
Oh
or they're
yeah.
just? Yeah. See, so then why? It's got to be these things that we are talking about. So, real quick, Jason, I guess one thing we should do is, should we talk about what symptoms a person may have if they have celiac disease, or celiac non-gluten sensitivity? So if this is happening to them, they might be able to figure out if that's the case, and they should be
Yeah,
tested for the antibodies, transglutamase antibodies and so forth.
yeah. Celiac disease is considered to be an autoimmune disorder.
Hmm.
It primarily affects the small intestine. Um, you end up with inflammation in your gut. Now, what is inflammation? Inflammation um, is the evidence of specific biomarkers, certain um, interleukins or cytokines that come out. Basically, your body uh, thinks that it's damaged or harmed or something, so it sends out these markers to go and tag things that it needs to destroy or to heal or something like that. So when somebody eats with celiac disease eats wheat, their intestines start getting inflamed and their body starts producing a lot of inflammatory markers to say, hey, the stomach's messed, or the not the stomach, but the small intestines are messed up. We need to come in and heal this. And there can be, because of that inflammation, a lot of different things can manifest. Like, depending upon how symptomatic you are and how sensitive you are to it, um, it might you might have a really reduced quality of life
Yes.
if you're starting to get iron deficiencies and osteoporosis, and you basically, like, you can't digest anything because there's so much inflammation
And the
that
small intestines where we absorb the majority of our nutrients.
yeah, right. And so you end up with people that are really getting messed up. There's
Malnourished, and
Yeah.
and I mean,
And
go ahead.
since you're getting like a lot of your simple sugars and stuff, and you're not getting the stuff that's more difficult to break down. There's just a much higher rate of diabetes in people with celiac disease. There's a higher, there people tend to have trouble with their thyroid because they're not absorbing iodine, and then there's also something called Hashimoto's, which we'll talk about later. People end up with psoriasis. Um, uh, People end up with this uh, patchy skin condition.
Dermatitis herpetiformis. We'll talk about that in a minute.
Yeah, yeah. Or yeah, lots of different types of dermatitis will arise from it. Even as mild as dandruff, all the way up to um, dermatitis herpetiformitis. So yeah, it's kind of interesting. Like people with a lot of skin problems, thyroid problems. It's a multi-organ issue. With people who are just mildly celiac that don't have severe symptoms, they might end up with some discomfort, some gas, some constipation. You might end up with swollen lymph nodes.
Intestinal pain.
Yeah, that kind of thing. It just basically kind of feels like a bellyache. Um, but yeah,
I mean,
1 to 2% of the population um, suffer from that, and
it's
then
probably higher than that in my estimation, but that's what they claim. Um,
yeah, and 40%, 43% of those diagnosed cases, they have severe celiac disease with multi-organal symptoms.
Now, I'll talk about myself. Now, I have celiac disease. There's two genes. There's probably more that contribute to that. That have polymorphins. I have a polymorphism in HLA-DQ2. I have a homozygous polymorphism in HLA-DQ8, and those are the genes that regulate the human leukocyte antigen system. So when your body produces HLA-DQ proteins, for example, it tends to tell the T helper cells to, hey, gluten isn't your problem, leave it alone. Don't have an inflammatory response to it. So since my body is not able to do that as well, I end up having an inflammatory response. And there's one reason, like it's a multiple, like celiac disease and non-gluten sensitivity, non-celiac. It's like multiple things that can cause it. Okay, like it isn't like one, like some people may have polymorphism, some people may not. Some people may have dysbiosis, some people may not. There's multiple reasons why this happens. But for me, purposely, when I had silent reflux years ago, and I started trying to eat a whole wheat because I thought it was better for you. It was way early in my health journey, and I started noticing that when I was eating whole wheat, I immediately would have to run to the bathroom, and I would within an hour or two, and have this massive anxiety and panic attack, and my intestines would hurt really bad, and I would defecate, and it would come out almost completely whole, Jason.
Yeah, it's not good.
And so then I started cutting out wheat a little bit, and then eventually it turned to me having ocular migraines, which I still do if I get glutened. I do my best to avoid it, but sometimes you're on trips and you're eating out. Sometimes you get cross contaminated, And then, like when people say, some people's sensitivity is that they can't eat gluten directly. Some people can't like eat, oil or foods with gluten have been fried in. Like everybody's tolerance is different. But so for me, it became systemic. It wasn't necessarily strictly in my gut anymore. So many people, they'll have symptoms that aren't always in their gut. They'll have brain fog, cognitive issues, depression, anxiety. If they have celiac disease, they'll get dermatitis herpetiformis because your skin, like your intestinal tract, has transglutamase, and it's used to help break down. It's used to help, I think, form the skin cell envelope, like keratinocytes and stuff. So dermatitis herpetiformis is literally your body, reacting to transglutamase in your skin. So you get these very, very itchy, very painful, like rash dots that show up primarily in the abdomen region. But it can be, throughout the whole skin. So, there's many people that for years are sick and they don't know why. They're wasting away, they're losing weight, they have all these nutritional deficiencies. They have migraines and joint pain, and then eventually, maybe if they're lucky, their doctor tests for transglutamase antibodies, and they show up positive for celiac disease. And I've written many blogs. I mean, it would take too long for us to talk about it all here on this podcast. I'll link the blogs in the show notes. But yeah, definitely if you're having digestive issues, probably cut out gluten for a month or so, cutting out wheat, and see if that makes you feel better. You only, if it doesn't, you just lost a month out of your life. It's in the grand scheme of things, that's no biggie, but it's definitely worth trying. Wouldn't you agree, Jason?
Yeah, for sure. At least a couple of weeks. Um, it's not something that for most people, if they cut gluten out for a month, the like their health benefits will be so gradual that they probably won't notice. But then they'll notice when they go back, and they'll be like,
Yes.
"Whoa, I don't feel good."
Yes. Yeah.
Um,
I got brain fog, or hey, my skin's erupting,
right. So with gluten, what we have, what we call non-celiac gluten sensitivity. They've done meta studies on the general population in the West, and they found um, that everybody, just about everybody, has higher inflammation markers when eating wheat. Now, um, the problem with that is that you could say that with just about every
Yeah,
food,
we react to everything we eat. I mean, secretory IgA is produced through everything we eat. Our body
right?
reacts to everything we ingest.
And so it's like I want to agree with that study because it's like, yeah, people probably shouldn't eat so much gluten. But on the other hand, if you did the same exact study with literally any other food, you would get the same results. So I don't know. If you did it with fish, you'd get the same results. If you did it with soy, you'd get the same results. If you did it with
Now,
milk.
again, is it the gluten they were using? Were they using, very high gluten? Were they using bread? Were they using purified gluten in high amounts? It's like the new studies that came out. It's not the gluten in non-celiac gluten sensitivity. It's the fructans that are in it and stuff like that and everything.
Mm,
And that may be for some people, especially if you have bacterial overgrowth in your small intestine. But
yeah,
the easy way you can test that out is just eat something that's high in fructans that's not wheat, like Jerusalem artichoke. If it gives you the same symptoms, it's the fructans. It's that
yeah.
simple.
Well, we did our podcast on diet. I think it was a two-parter, right?
Yes, and
And so
people loved it. By the way,
like I just don't think grain should be the primary portion of your diet. I think most of that should be non-starchy vegetables. Should
hmm
be at least half of your plate should be something like that, and then um, maybe a quarter to less than that of each meal should be any type of grain or starch. And so just the quantity, just the sheer quantity that people are eating, you don't really need to eat that much grain. You don't need to eat, you know, your if you wake up for breakfast and you eat cereal and then you eat a sandwich for lunch and then a hamburger for dinner or pizza or something like that or
yeah, it's nothing
pasta.
but wheat.
Yeah, I mean it's just you're just eating that all day. Where are your leafy greens? Where are your vegetables?
Where or
So
where are your in season fruits or your berries? Where's anything? I mean, a lot of these a lot of these grains, they have very little nutritional content.
yeah,
I mean, they're carbohydrates, which is a nutrient. People can argue that.
yeah.
But other than that, I mean, when you're eating white rice, you're just eating glucose. Unless it's resistant starch. If you're eating it fresh, you're just pretty much eating glucose, and that's it. You're getting a lot of nutrients where you get nutrients if you're eating meat, proper pasture dairy,
Yeah.
eating, your or even vegetables that are prepared properly. Some people may react negatively to certain vegetables, like if they're high in oxalates, for example, or high in histamine and stuff. Same with fruit, but these food have way more nutrients than majority of your grains are going to have.
Well, I just want to clear that up a little bit because carbohydrate is a nutrient. And so you're getting plenty of carbohydrate. So you're getting plenty of,
Don't tell the ketogenic people that, or
yeah.
the zero carb people, the carnivore people.
Well, I mean, there are macronutrients, right? And there are micronutrients. So when we say eat something that's nutrient rich, what we're not saying is like, because I mean, I could eat sugar packets and that's extremely nutrient rich, right? But we're not talking about, we're talking about getting a wide range of nutrients, vitamins and minerals, lots of micronutrients and lots of macronutrients as well. What the problem is when you eat a single type of food or a single type of nutrient in concentration, and having like you have what's like a bolus effect, and that's really hard on the tight junctions because okay, so imagine the lining of your intestines, right? And just zoom in, just like you're on Google Maps or something, hit control and start scrolling in. Okay, now you can start to see the cells, and you scroll in even more, and you see all the cells are kind of lined up, they're kind of in this grid, and they're side by side, but you can see their cell membranes are touching. Well, they have these junctions in between the cell membranes, and when those junctions, when there's any sort of osmotic effect, which means there's something that a high concentration of something in the gut is going to draw in water, those junctions open up. And then that's what we call leaky gut. When those junctions open up to allow the water to come in, it's not just the water doesn't just come in. When before they close, other stuff starts to leak out, and that's what we don't want. And so when you eat, it's good to eat a variety of different nutrients and balance everything out because it's easier on your gut. You're not getting that bolus effect, and you're not going to have problems with your tight junctions, and it's way better for your digestive health. So yeah, eating just like a ton of bread all the time, just eating just grains nonstop, um, you're not getting a wide range of nutrients like you are if you're eating a balanced diet. I should do a cooking show. I think a lot of people, they don't want to eat certain things because they don't know how to cook them right. And
Yeah,
there's some tricks out there, like it took me forever to figure out how to cook zucchini properly, or
yeah.
or eggplant, or just like a lot of different things. And it's just like you're watching the cooking channel. What is that called? Food TV or
Food
whatever.
Network, Food
Yeah,
Network.
I don't have a TV anymore.
Diners, drive-ins, and dives with Guy Fieri.
Yeah, you're watching this stuff, and they don't go over like some of the subtle things that you need to do to make your vegetables taste good, to where you prepare your vegetables. And yes, it does take longer, and like it does. You do have to rest them and do stuff, just like with
Resting and blanching and
yeah,
cooking in
yeah,
butter and
and how to remove starches from the surfaces, how to remove
yep.
the waxes and stuff. Like you just need to know how to do that. It takes longer, how to rinse your rice properly. All that stuff, it takes a little bit longer to do, and with zucchini it takes a couple hours longer. Now you're not sitting there with the zucchini for 2 hours, but you need to start preparing it because you got to let it rest. And that's the same with your potatoes. When you chop your potatoes, you got to let them soak to remove the starches, all that kind
Yep.
of stuff. If people knew those things, I think they would want to eat more vegetables if their food tasted better, and they would maybe eat. I mean, fresh baked bread tastes delicious. I love it too, but I can make zucchini taste really good too, so that I can eat, a lot of different things on my plate,
So can I. Yeah,
and,
I
and,
mean
and
that.
have a lot of it taste really good.
Yeah, that's the problem. Is we're so used to eating. Americans are so used to getting their vegetables out of cans, or even frozen. Frozen's better than canned. Canned absolute worst, but
Yeah.
it's just if you prepare them right, they taste good. I mean, I didn't like vegetables very
Well,
much growing up, but now as an adult, I'm like, yeah, Brussels sprouts sautéed in butter with salt and bacon. I mean, yeah, give me that. I'll eat a whole plate of that. I don't have to eat anything else.
yeah, I mean,
you know,
frozen vegetables, and I do this sometimes. If I get home and I don't have time,
yeah, I use frozen
I'll
vegetables
get,
too. I steam
you
them.
know, I'll get frozen broccoli out of there, and do it. But here's the deal: most people do it like the frozen stuff, the pre-prepared stuff, because they don't like to chop. Well, when's the last time you sharpened your knife? When's the last
Yesterday
time
for
you?
me.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of these people, they haven't sharpened their knives and they're cutting with dull knives, and yeah, it's no fun to chop stuff when when your knife is dull. So get out there, sharpen your knife every time before you use it. Make sure that you got, you have one of those honing rods, and you know what you're doing. I mean, it's not that hard to figure out, but keep your blade nice and sharp. It's easier to keep it sharp than if you dull it way down, and then all of a sudden now you gotta go a step further, and you got to put a whole new edge on it because there's not enough left
Yeah.
of the blade. So just keeping that thing sharp is gonna, it's gonna make cooking so much more fun for you. So it's actually a joy to run like a super sharp knife through something.
We've
Watch it just glide through.
we've lost these ancestral preparation methods. I mean, the Indians found out if you soak corn in limestone, for example, through the nixtamalization process, you open up the bioavailable B vitamins and you don't, cause deficiencies and stuff like that. Or soaking grains or soaking beans. We forgot all this. We don't do that anymore. And it might be why our food is more toxic, of course, with everything we spray on it, everything we fortified to make up for it and everything. It's a mess.
Yeah. Yeah. It's make sure you wash your produce really well before you
Yep.
use it.
I have a video on the Fix Your Gut channel on how to properly do it, and it's a pain. I do it every time. I spray it. I let it soak in a baking soda solution,
Okay.
and then after that, I spray this organic vegetable cleaner that I have that has delimonene in it, and I wash it in
Okay.
purified water,
Is it
and then
is it one of those like ethanol based deals?
yes, ethanol and organic ethanol and delimonene is the main components of it.
Okay.
Um, and in doing so, I'm not ingesting a lot. Is it a pain in the butt to do? Yes, it is, but it's necessary in the modern times that we live in.
Yeah, just go get yourself some cheap vodka, save yourself a lot of money, and just dilute it with water and get a spray bottle and spray it like that. It's essentially the same stuff that's going to be in your fit cleaner or whatever. Um, yeah, it's just a way better thing to do.
The baking soda method works very well and is extremely cheap.
Yeah, for
And they've
sure.
done studies of that, of it just, pesticides leaching out of the vegetables and into the baking soda mixture, water
Yeah,
mixture. So.
yeah, for sure. So yeah, we've covered a lot about why maybe you should avoid gluten, not necessarily because you're sensitive to it or because whatever, but just eating a lot of it isn't healthy. You want to have a balanced diet, and I think that if you learn how to make food that tastes good, you're going to have a wider range of stuff. You can choose different grains that may work better for you. Maybe barley works better for you. Maybe rye, maybe oats, maybe rice, buckwheat. If you're sensitive to one thing, you might not be sensitive to something else. So keep trying. Maybe go organic. Maybe it's a pesticide issue. Maybe it's get something that's non-fortified. It's not. It might not just be the gluten in the product
Mhm.
that you're eating that's causing you the problem. If you have a healthier gut, you can handle eating um, these slow digesting proteins a lot easier. You can handle drinking milk a lot easier too, unless you have some kind of a genetic thing going on. So, if your gut's in good shape and you eat a cheeseburger, you're probably not going to have as many issues as if, you've got horrible digestion and then you eat the cheeseburger and then all of a sudden you get a tummy ache and you're sick and you don't want to do anything. And, that's never a good deal.
And it's probably best for you to prepare the cheeseburger at home with some sort of organic, non-fortified bread or bread that you baked yourself. And that's the biggest takeaway from this podcast is we need to get back to preparing food in better ways than we do now. And I understand you can't do it every night. I can't do it every night, but doing it when you can and trying to make it more of a habit may help our digestion better overall.
If you want to be gluten free, you can make your own hamburger buns out of egg whites. All you need is two eggs, separate the whites from the yolks, and you just beat the eggs. You just beat them really good with a whisk until they gets nice and foamy, and it'll foam up, kind of like you're taking a bubble bath or something. And you just scoop it out, put it on a pan, bake it in the oven until it gets nice and golden brown on the outside. Cut it in half. Boom! You got your gluten free egg white buns, throw in your hamburger meat, your patty, your tomato, your lettuce, pickles, onions, whatever you want to put in your burger, all right there, and you're good to go. It doesn't taste exactly like regular bun would, but it's still kind of like chewy, and it's got a good texture to it. So
Very few
give it
gluten
a try.
things do. But that being said, if you make them at your house, trust me, if you learn how to cook things and you learn how to bake, because I have a very good friend of mine who was a baker, and he makes gluten-free things for us because he has digestive issues too. If you do it right, it almost tastes the same in a lot of ways. You know, the organic corn pasta, for example, it tastes very, very close to regular pasta, in its consistency and its texture. So, if you have celiac disease or you think gluten's bothering you, you could try healthier options, non-fortified organic gluten, like we mentioned earlier, or you might have to give it up and try these other things. Diet, the big thing from this and the big thing take away from our diet episodes is diet is personal to everybody. There's
Mhm.
not one set diet and there's not one set recommendation except to try to eat the healthiest that you can with these grains and how they're prepared. But, some people, it
Yeah.
may affect one person differently than it does the other. There's no blanket statement on this.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, if you're a lot of people are sensitive to eggs, and you go and try out my recipe with your egg white buns and make this like baked meringue, that's gonna mess you up with all that element. So yeah, like
Especially if you have
what?
cytomegalovirus reactivation,
Yeah,
apparently.
somebody who has is sensitive to one thing can be completely good with another thing, and you got to figure out what's going on with you, and and try to not just try to avoid everything that you're sensitive to, but try to get your gut in better shape so that you don't have as many sensitivities, because that's not normal, and it shouldn't be normal. Like, you shouldn't have all these, unless you've got a genetic thing, of course, and there's not anything you can do about it. Like with John, and John's probably never going to be able to, you know, eat gluten without
Well, we
consequences.
don't know that. I mean, I did for years until I couldn't anymore, and I couldn't because my microbiome had gotten broken down and my immune system had gotten into shape. So, in theory, there is a possibility I could, even with the genes. Now, should I? Probably not. But, for years, it didn't cause the problems that I had when I got, until I had the breakdown in my early 20s. So there are some people even with celiac disease, and I caution this, but I still want to mention it, that once they heal their guts and they get their microbiome better and their immune system's functioning better, that they are able to ingest einkorn organic wheat, for example.
Yeah. So, like, I don't know. With gluten, I think that's a relatively safe thing to do. But if you have peanut allergies or something like that, and you're like, I haven't had a peanut in 10 years. And you're like, well, my gut's in good shape. I'm going to try to
Well, I will
reintroduce.
say that they
Keep
are
your
they are doing
Yeah,
that to get people. They are doing that in University Chapel here near me,
yeah.
to get people out of peanut allergies. They're micro dosing them.
They are, but if that's
It's
not
not the
something to
same as
be.
eating a peanut. I
That's
understand.
not something that you try at home, and keep your EpiPen very close by.
Yes, yes. Gluten is a little bit different in that regard. That being said, it does make me very ill, though, and there's some people I've coached that it makes them extraordinarily ill.
Right. So I want to go over this again. Okay. Uh, for people who have celiac disease, a celiac disease is an autoimmune condition. It is not an allergy. You are not allergic to
Yes,
gluten. All right.
it's your body reacting negatively to it. Your immune system's attacking itself, which should not.
Okay. So you don't have a food allergy if you're celiac.
No,
I'm
it's a
sorry, you
serious
don't.
medical. It's a serious medical condition,
Okay.
and there's a lot of ignorance around that, where people will be like, "Oh, you just have diarrhea if you have celiac disease and you eat gluten. Oh, you can have this. It's a party. You just have a little stomach upset, like it's lactose intolerance." No, no.
Right.
For
Right.
me, it puts me out of condition for 2 days with an ocular migraine and vomiting.
Right.
So
So, but there are actual food allergies where people who are allergic to shellfish, people who are allergic to
yes,
peanut, like, this is an anaphylactic response to those proteins. It's completely different and much more life threatening than somebody with gluten. Now, gluten, yeah, it might take you off your feet for a couple days, but it's not going to kill you because your throat swells up so much that you can't breathe. So, just if you've got celiac, yeah, it sucks for you, but it's not really an allergy. So, you know,
And rarely you can have both. I have seen both, Jason.
yeah.
But yes, there is a difference between a life-threatening allergic reaction and most manifestations of celiac disease. It kills you much slower, where the life-threatening allergic reaction kills you very quickly if not treated properly.
All right, good. All right, I'm done with my sermon on allergies. I just really can't stand it when people say that they have an allergy and they don't, and I think that it messes it up for people who like could die if you have an issue. But I hope you enjoyed the podcast on wheat and other grains, and learn to cook. Maybe I'll do some cooking videos. Maybe I'll put those up there someday. That might be fun. So take care, everybody. Have a great week.
Take care. Bye.